Before proceeding on to verse 43, I'd like to address one issue which, if you've got any familiarity with Buddhism already, and you've listened to the past few videos, then it needs addressing. And that's to do with the first aspect of the threefold training. I covered the threefold training in video 36. And the threefold training has got three aspects. The first one is Śīla, or Śīla, which is about observing ethical precepts. The second aspect of the threefold training is Samadhi, and the third one is Prajna, or spiritual insight, or wisdom. I focused on Samadhi and Prajna. And in the last few videos I've been talking about the transformation of our inner world, replacing the fabrications of conventional reality with fabrications which are more inspiring towards spiritual practice, or conducive towards spiritual practice. And I said that this is what Śīla is actually about. The ethical training is actually about developing our inner world. So how does this work? Well, let's look at these rules. Let's look at Śīla in more detail. And it's normally embodied in what are known as the 5 precepts. And I'm going to be referring to the article in Wikipedia called the 5 Precepts, which I would recommend. One point which is important for the Westerner is that these rules are not formulated as imperatives, but as training rules that lay people undertake voluntarily to facilitate practice. So they're not strictures in the sense of the 10 Commandments. They're not telling us what to do. They're supposed to facilitate our spiritual practice, which in traditional terms would be meditation. But what we are interested in as enlightenment practitioners is how they help us to practice enlightenment. How do they help us to come back to pure Samadhi? That is, Samadhi which is about remaining focused on the true nature of our own awareness. Well, let's first of all look at these 5 precepts. The first one's about not killing. The second one's about not stealing. The third one is about abstaining from sexual misconduct. The fourth one's about not lying. And the fifth one is about abstaining from intoxicants. So they're quite straightforward, really, especially if you're a conventional Buddhist. If you're a Western Buddhist, then you're going to have to ask a few more questions, like what's meant by sexual misconduct. Does this mean we're supposed to be celibate? And what about this one about intoxicants? I quite like a drink. Am I not allowed to have a drink anymore? Well, you have to work that out if you're a Buddhist. But we're not concerned with being Buddhists. What we want to see is how these relate to our enlightenment practice. Enlightenment practice is about our relationship with the world. It's about our relationship with conventional reality. These are two separate things. Conventional reality is the reality of the culture in which we live. And our relationship with the world is far more individual. It's tied in with our moods and our psychology and so on. As spiritual practitioners, We are not concerned in looking for fulfillment in the world. There is nothing out there that we need which is going to make us complete or whole. But even after we've touched realization, there is still this habitual looking outwards for happiness, for contentment. And that habitual looking outwards is what undermines happiness and contentment. And this is what the 5 precepts address. They address basic ways of interacting, basic ways of manipulating what's out there for our own satisfaction. Either in terms of grabbing something for ourselves or of pushing it away. So the first one, about killing, is about pushing something away. The second one, to do with stealing, is about appropriating something for ourselves, for our own satisfaction. Similarly with sexual misconduct, it's about getting something out there for our satisfaction. The fourth one, about lying, is a little bit more subtle. It's to do with wanting to create the right impression, wanting a certain degree of approval, and saying what we need to say in order to get that approval, to make a certain impression. And the fifth one, about intoxicants, is about blanking out the world again, blanking it all out. So the fifth one is very similar to the first one, except rather than inflicting it out there, we're inflicting it in here. The second and the third, to do with stealing and sexual misconduct, are about appropriating something. And the one about speech is much subtler. It's to do with manipulating things for our own gain. So this is it. As spiritual practitioners, we are not looking to the external world for satisfaction. And the 5 precepts are not about external action, they're about our inner attitude. Do we have a feeling that there's something or someone that we'd like to kill? Does our mind rest in fantasies of sexual appropriation? Does it dwell on what we might own for our own satisfaction, on wealth? Do we have a fantasy about how we are established in the truth, and people might adore us? Is that what's driving us on? Or this is to do with false speech, or the wrong use of speech? Or are we just wanting it all to stop? Are we wanting it all to end? This is intoxication. Although there's nothing wrong with putting these into practice in the external world, and at the time I'm recording this, there are these riots going on in England which show human behaviour at its worst. It's all about gratification, self-gratification at the expense of others. It doesn't matter what's done to others as long as I am gratified. That's what it's about. And the precepts are about the opposite of that. They are about not looking at all for gratification in objects or people. So although it'd be good to have these as general rules in society at large, that's not really the concern here in this video series. The concern is for us to stop looking for gratification externally, and in doing so we construct our own inner world. It's not just about imposing strictures on ourselves. It's about remembering the greater reward. The Wikipedia article mentions that the 5 precepts are gifts toward oneself and others. So these aren't strictures, although they're often taken as such. They're reminders of where we should be looking for our satisfaction. They're reminders that we should be looking to our fundamental awareness. And failing that, we can turn to the cosmology that Buddhism provides, or any other cosmology that you subscribe to in terms of higher beings, heavens or Buddha lands, and so on. So in this way we use Śīla, we use the ethical training, ideally to remind us of our fundamental awareness and to look for satisfaction there, or if that eludes us, we relate to a rich developing inner world, what was referred to previously as the world of the Sambhogakaya, the body of mutual enjoyment.